Nyarlthotep, the crawling chaos. I am the last. I will tell the audient void. I do not recall distinctly when it began, but it was months ago. The general tension was horrible. To a season of political and social upheaval was added a strange and brooding apprehension of hideous physical danger. A danger widespread and all-embracing, such a danger as may be imagined only in the most terrible phantasms of the night. I recall that the people went about with pale and worried faces, and whispered warnings and prophecies which no one dared consciously repeat or acknowledge to himself that he had heard. A sense of monstrous guilt was upon the land, and out of the abysses between the stars swept chill currents that made men shiver in dark and lonely places. There was a demonic alteration in the sequence of seasons. The autumn heat lingered fearsomely, and everyone felt that the world and perhaps the universe had passed from the control of known gods or forces to that of gods or forces which were unknown. And it was then that Nyarlathotep came out of Egypt. Who he was, none could tell, but he was of the old native blood and looked like a pharaoh. The fellahin knelt when they saw him, yet could not say why. He said he had risen up out of the blackness of 27 centuries, and that he had heard messages from places not on this planet. Into the lands of civilization came Nyarlathotep, swarthy, slender, and sinister, always buying some strange instruments of glass and metal and combining them into instruments yet stranger. He spoke much of the sciences of electricity and psychology, and gave exhibitions of power which sent his spectators away speechless, yet which swelled his fame to exceeding magnitude. Men advised one another to see Nyarlathotep and shuddered, and where Nyarlathotep went, rest vanished. For the small hours were rent with the screams of nightmare. Never before had the screams of nightmare been such a public problem. Now the wise men almost wished they could forbid sleep in the small hours, that the shrieks of cities might less horribly disrupt the pale, pitilling moon as it glimmered on green waters gliding under bridges and old steeples crumbling against a sickly sky. I remember when Nyarlathotep came to my city, the great, the old, the terrible city of unnumbered crimes. My friend had told me of him, and of the impelling fascination and allurement of his revelations, and I burned with eagerness to explore his uttermost mysteries. My friend said they were horrible and impressive beyond most fevered imaginations, that what was thrown on a screen in the darkened room prophesied things none but Nyarlathotep dared prophesy, and that in the sputter of his sparks that there were taken from men that which had never been taken before, yet which shewed only in the eyes. And I heard it hinted abroad that those who knew Nyarlathotep looked on sights which others saw not. Ooh, spooky! It was in the hot autumn that I went through the night with the restless crowds to see Nyarlathotep. Through the stifling night and up the endless stairs into the choking room, and shadowed on a screen, I saw hooded forms amidst ruins, and yellow evil faces peering from behind fallen monuments. And I saw the world battling against blackness, against the waves of destruction from ultimate space, whirling, churning, struggling around the dimming, cooling sun. Then the sparks played amazingly around the heads of the spectators, and hair stood up on end, whilst shadows more grotesque than I can tell came out and squatted on the heads. And when I, who was colder and more scientific than the rest, mumbled a trembling protest about imposture and static electricity, Nyarlathotep drave us all out down the dizzy stairs into the damp, hot, deserted midnight streets. I screamed aloud that I was not afraid, that I never could be afraid. Another screamed with me for solace. We swore to one another that the city was exactly the same and still alive, and when the electric lights began to fade, we cursed the company over and over again and laughed at the queer faces we made. I believe we felt something coming down from the greenish moon, for when we began to depend on its lights, we drifted into curious, involuntary formations and seemed to know our destinations through we dared not to think of them. Once we looked at the pavement and found the blocks loose and displaced by grass, with scarce a line of rusted metal to shew where the tramways had run, and again we saw a tramcar, lone, windowless, dilapidated, and almost on its side. When we gazed around the horizon, we could not find the third tower by the river, and noticed that the silhouette of the second tower was ragged at the top. Then we split up into narrow columns, each of which seemed in a different direction. One disappeared in a narrow alley to the left, leaving only the echo of a shocking moan. Another filed down a weak, weed-choked subway entrance, howling with a laughter that was mad. My own column was sucked towards the open country, and presently felt a chill which was not of the hot autumn. For as we stalked out on the dark moor, we beheld around us the hellish moon glitter of evil snows, trackless, inexplicable snows, swept asunder in one direction only, where lay a gulf all the blacker for its glittering walls. The column seemed very thin indeed as it was plodded dreamingly into the gulf. I lingered behind, for the black rift in the green-litten snow was frightful, and I thought I had heard the reverberations of a disquieting wail as my companions vanished. But my power to linger was slight, as if beckoned by those who had gone before. I half floated between the titanic snowdrifts, quivering and afraid, into the sightless vortex of the unimaginable. Screamingly sentient, dumbly delirious, only the gods that were can tell. A sickened, sensitive shadow writhing in hands that are not hands, and whirled blindly past ghastly midnights of rotting creation, corpses of dead worlds with sores that were cities, charnel winds that brush the pallid stars and make them flicker low, beyond the world's vague ghosts of monstrous things, half-seen columns of unsanctified temples that rest on nameless rocks beneath space and reach up to dizzy vacua above the spheres of light and darkness. And through this revolting graveyard of the universe, the muffled, maddening beating of drums and thin, monotonous whine of blasphemous flutes from inconceivable, unlighted chambers beyond time, the detestable pounding and piping whereunto dance slowly, awkwardly, and absurdly the gigantic, timbrous ultimate gods, the blind, voiceless, mindless gargoyles whose soul is Nyarlthotep. Alright, that was Nyarlathotep by H.P. Lovecraft, written in 1920. Probably my favorite story of his by far. I mean, I'm a big fan of all of his work, but this one in particular is one of my favorites. The way it just talks about people just losing hope and the darkness covering everything, and just, at the end you just feel like there's nothing left and you're just doomed to rot. It's amazing. And one thing I love about Nyarlathotep is, compared to all the other characters in the H.P. Lovecraft mythos, he's one of the only ones that actually interacts with humans. He actually has like a human-esque figure that he can take form of. And it's kind of like that uncanny valley type thing, like Mandela Catalog and all that stuff, which is really, really cool, and also, really creepy. And unlike all of his brothers and sisters and his father Azathoth, he doesn't really care for death and destruction. He's more of just like a trickster, prankster guy. He loves deceiving and manipulating. He loves just causing mass panic, mass hysteria. He revels in the fact of, revels in just ruining people's days. He's literally the walking embodiment of a bad day. and I love him. From his design to just the way he's described, and just everything about this character. I love it. And if you're not familiar with H.P. Lovecraft, he was born 1890 in Rhode Island. And he is the creator of the popular character Cthulhu. I'm sure you know Cthulhu. Everyone knows Cthulhu. And he started writing around when he was 7 to 8 years old, and took a huge interest in astronomy and chemistry. And that's kind of where his love for like the space and cosmic horror aspect started. And he wrote his first book called The Alchemist when he was about 17 or 18, and that's like a short story about like wizards and stuff. I'm not too familiar with it, but I know it's about wizards and all that. And, H.P. Lovecraft himself, very interesting character, very troubled individual. His father died when he was about 8 years old, and, he had a troubling life growing up, but he made it work, and he wrote some of the greatest works of art and works of literature of all time, horror-wise. Many consider, including myself, that he is the father of cosmic horror, which, birthed fucking Alien. Come on, Alien, fucking awesome. And, a lot of horror today, too, is inspired by H.P. Lovecraft. Even though it was more than about 200 years ago, well, 150, whatever, I'm bad at math, about a long time ago, he still has an impact today, and I find that so awesome, because, I love H.P. Lovecraft. You can find his work on the internet for free. It's for everybody. And it has every single one of his stories. And Nyarlthotep in particular, he's this tall, slim, joyless figure who just revels in ruining people's days, because in the story it says at the end, he's just out here causing mass hysteria, and the guy who's narrating the story he's trying to show he's not afraid, but at the end of the day, there's nothing you can do against this guy. There's literally nothing you can do. He's the messenger for his dad, Azathoth, which we'll get into him another time. That's a whole other thing. And he's like a messenger, like Mercury from Roman time, from the Roman mythology. He's the messenger of the gods, pretty much. And he fucking loves chaos. He just can't get enough out of it, man. He eats, sleeps, breathes chaos, and he does not care about death or destruction like the others. He just wants to see people mentally destroy themselves, and just all of his work just has inspired me to like write short stories of my own with horror, which all of them have been terrible. In like 10th grade, I wrote one about like a zombie horror, the high school thing. It was very bad. Don't look it up. But yeah, H.P. Lovecraft. This was Nyarlathotep, one of my favorites. We'll probably get more into like more H.P. Lovecraft stuff in the future. Definitely Azathoth, who is his Nyarlathotep's father, and we'll eventually tackle Cthulhu. But more on Nyarlathotep. I mean, just look at him. Look at this freak. Look at this tentacle freak of a man right here. It's not even a man. It's just a being, an it. And if I'm chilling in the woods and I see this dude just right up on me, I'm gonna be like, "Whoa, I had a good run. Now it's over. There's nothing I can do." And you see so much of H.P. Lovecraft's work in media today about like the popular Call of Cthulhu game, Cthulhu. Any like cosmic horror movie or show or anything. Chances are the director or creator researched H.P. Lovecraft for this, because many see him as the father of cosmic horror, and I 100% wholeheartedly agree with that. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. I hope you guys learned a thing or two, and I hope I either helped you fall asleep or helped you get through work or school or whatever. But yeah, my name's Jesse, the one voice with many words, and this has been Nyarlathotep by H.P. Lovecraft. I hope you all enjoyed, and I can't wait to see y'all in the next one. See ya.